I found out on a Tuesday. Tuesday is a petty day for a life to split open. Thin, gray, the kind that never decides if it's going to rain. I remember because she was sipping coffee at the kitchen counter, scrolling with that little half smile people make when they're somewhere else entirely. I'm an accountant by trade and disposition, which is just a polite way of saying I believe in columns balancing and stories fitting. So that morning I leaned in to kiss her cheek, and she tilted her phone ever so slightly away from me. Small move. Too small. Morning, she said, not looking up. Her tone was light, casual, but her fingers were moving fast across the screen. I shrugged it off, at least I tried to, but when she went to grab her shoes from the bedroom, she left the phone behind against the counter. I shouldn't have touched it. God knows I wanted to be the kind of husband who never checked, but my hand moved before my head could stop it. The screen lit up, and one message sat there at the top, glowing like a match in the dark. Good morning, gorgeous. I wish I was waking up next to you again. My chest tightened. My mouth went dry. I put the phone down as gently as you put a sleeping child into a crib you're leaving forever before I saw more. I didn't need more. She came back into the kitchen, heels in one hand, lipstick in the other, and gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. Don't forget dinner tonight, she said, slipping into her blazer like the day was just another day. And then she was gone. Door shut, silence pressing in. I sat down on the chair, realized I had the kind of stillness inside me that doesn't panic. It inventories. It asked, what do we own together? What do we owe? What's the penalty for breaking a lease? If I canceled the gym, the streaming services, the meal kit that always arrived with tiny packets of butter like sacrament, how many months could I float? It took me 3 hours to reorder the contents of my mind. In the 4th hour, I opened the text thread where my wife had messaged me pictures from work, open floor plan office, a plant wall, yogurt with granola. I scrolled back through a year of her small talk and my small talk and counted the days we hadn't really been there. In the 5th hour, I took the day off, called my boss, and lied. Stomach bug, probably the salad. He told me to feel better. In the 6th hour, I sat on the edge of our bed, looked at the room we'd picked together, her neutral throws and my framed baseball tickets, and started sorting piles. Keep, donate, trash, memory. It was 2 years into our marriage. We had no children. We had separate bank accounts we pretended were one because it felt romantic to split a grocery bill and call it ours. We had taken exactly 2 weekend trips together, both to places that looked like other places we admired but couldn't afford. I didn't confront her. Some people go nuclear. I wanted to go quiet. I wanted to go clean. That night she came home late and made a show of it, texting me a picture of the lobby of her office, a mock complaint about a broken elevator that had never once broken. She creaked open the door, paused like a child expecting to be caught, then crossed the threshold as if expecting nothing at all. She slipped off her flats and asked me how my day had been. She smelled like pepper and a victory she didn't need. Fine, I said. You? She said, fine. Then she took a shower and sang 2 lines of a song she never finished. She went to bed and rolled away from me, and when her breathing steadied, I got up and opened the window and let the night move through the room. The next morning, I wrote a resignation letter. Clean, grateful, firm. My boss, a gentle man with hollow cheeks who liked to talk about fishing trips he rarely took, squinted at me across his bifocals. Is it the money? He asked, because that's the kind of life he understood how to fix. No, I said, because it wasn't. He nodded like he'd expected as much. I opened a spreadsheet. I listed everything we had. I took pictures of the furniture with my phone and sent them to nobody. At lunch, I went to the bank and asked about transferring balances, about fees. In the late afternoon, I texted my friend Marcus, the one who'd known me since college, who'd watched me go from earnest to married like a time-lapse of a plant that never quite found the sun. I told him I was traveling next month for work. Might be gone a while. He asked where. I said, east. He sent an emoji with big eyes and said, call me when you land. In the evenings, I studied maps of the country like a person trying to read his own palm. I didn't want to cross an ocean. I didn't want to return to my childhood town. I wanted to be new without being silly about it. I chose North Carolina because it seemed temperate in geography and temperament, and because Raleigh had a job posting that read like a dare I could win. Auditing mid-level, health insurance that won't insult you, room to grow if you're patient and have a good shirt. I can do patient. The week I planned the move, she was euphoric, and I realized she must think she had a second life that would stay young in her pocket. She texted a lot. She laughed at nothing. She told me she loved me over dinner, and I said it back because it felt like saying goodbye without declaring war. On Thursday, she left her phone on the kitchen counter while she showered, and it lit up, bright as a confession. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. I already knew the shape of the truth, and the details were a kind of cruelty. 2 weeks later, I took a long lunch and walked to the courthouse to learn about paperwork. The clerk had the practical smile of someone who sees everything and grows no new opinion. She told me what forms I needed, what the timeline would be, what it cost to end things that never really began. North Carolina had a job waiting. I asked about changing my mailing address. I asked about the way names work when they stop being glued together. When I came home, she was packing for a retreat I hadn't heard about. 2 days at a spa upstate where they teach you to stop grinding your teeth by charging for it. She kissed me twice. She told me I should take care of myself while she was gone. I told her I would. I left a day later with 2 suitcases, a backpack, and a shoebox of photographs that felt older than they were. I texted Marcus from a rest stop that smelled like coffee and diesel and rain. On my way. He called. I didn't pick up. He texted me a thumbs up and a picture of his dog sunbathing, as if to say, "This is what home looks like." On the highway, the car filled with my own breathing. My phone lit up with her calls and unlit with my decision. My wife called. She left a voicemail that began with my name and ended in silence. She texted 3 times a row, "Are you home? Are you okay? Call me." I didn't. I turned the sound off and watched the road lay itself long in front of me, lane by lane, mile by mile, the country unzipping. I arrived in Raleigh with that particular exhaustion that feels like being hollowed out and used for a lantern. I slept in a motel where the ice machine wheezed like it was trying to quit. Ate dinner at a place that punished overcooking but apologized with gravy. I watched local news about a lost parrot that kept saying help and terrifying people. Woke up before the alarm because the sun didn't need my permission. The first thing I learned in Raleigh was the smell of the coffee shop downstairs from the room I rented, burnt sugar and cinnamon and new paper. The owner had a lighthouse tattoo and a rule, no laptops after 5, talk to a person or leave. I liked that she had rules she could enforce. My new job started on a Monday. The office was simple and bright, with desks that pretended to be communal and a break room that kept the good creamer locked behind a cabinet door labeled "Please Ask." My manager, a quick, neat woman named Vina, introduced me to the team and pointed at a desk no one had warmed yet. "Ask for anything you need," she said, and before I could answer, she was talking to someone else because offices run on attention like hummingbirds run on sugar. There was a plant left behind by the last person, thriving despite the window's indifference. I watered it because I liked to be on something's side. That's when I met Eliza. She wasn't beautiful in the way magazines reward, but she was beautiful in the way you notice in lines. The angle of her jaw when she thought hard, the way her eyes had a ring of gray around the iris like weather on water, the curve of her mouth when she decided she might laugh. She wore her hair in a knot that never held, and the strands she didn't chase looked like they were exactly where they wanted to be. She introduced herself without a smile. "You're the new one," she said, and it wasn't mean, exactly. It was precise, as if naming a variable she would later substitute into a problem to solve. "Guilty," I said. I know," she said. "HR sent the email." She wore a small gold necklace with a tiny charm in the shape of a door. She asked me how I liked the coffee and then told me it was terrible before I could answer. She asked me if I preferred spreadsheets or databases. And before I could answer, she said, "You'll say spreadsheets. You've got that face." I opened my mouth to object because I didn't like anyone doing math with me in it, but she was already at her desk opening a document with 50 tabs, all named after oceans. We didn't get along that first week. It wasn't fireworks. It was friction. It was the way I liked my columns tight, and she liked them to breathe. She was kind to everyone else and short with me, and I kept catching myself wanting her approval, which irritated me because I had come here to be accountable only to the math of my own life. I answered emails quickly with bullet points embedded for clarity. I stayed late to take on extra auditing work because I wanted to fall asleep too tired to remember the shape of my old apartment. Eliza stayed late too for reasons that had nothing to do with me. She put on headphones and nodded at nothing in particular and typed like she was playing a piano in a city where pianos were illegal. The second week, I corrected one of her numbers. It was petty. It was in a cell she'd left hidden and unformatted, and I told her I'd fixed it. She pulled off her headphones slowly, as if retrieving them from very cold water. "Did I ask you to fix it?" she said. "No," I said. "But it was wrong." She looked at me for a long moment, and I had the feeling of being weighed not for my sins, but for my density. Then she said, "Thanks," and turned back to her screen. The next day, she brought me a coffee from the place around the corner that she said had the only drinkable espresso within a 3-mile radius. We didn't talk while we drank it, and it was a kind of truce that didn't need terms. Around that time, my wife began calling twice a day, every day. She left voicemails with the sound of air at the edges of them. She sent texts that got shorter and shorter until they were only punctuation. Then she sent long ones that told whole stories about her day, as if text messages could rebuild a house. I didn't answer. I blocked her number. She called from another. I blocked that too. She found me on email, and I set a filter. Then she found me on the one platform I hadn't thought to scrub, and she sent a message that said simply, "I'm sorry." I wasn't angry in the way people like to imagine, with shouting and things breaking. I felt something quieter, an ache with its own pulse, and underneath it, a pocket of relief that made me feel slightly ashamed. I had been waiting for a long time to feel free enough to leave. She had given me a door, even if she didn't mean to, and I was walking through it. At work, I learned how to read the rhythm of the team. People told small jokes like coins to be exchanged for small kindnesses. At 3 p.m. every day, a chorus of chairs slid backward, and there was a pilgrimage to the refrigerated seltzers. On Thursdays, an email would go out asking for potluck signups, and on Fridays, someone put out a bowl of candy with a sign that said, "Take 2," and people did. Precisely. Eliza and I fell into a pattern of argument and almost friendship that felt like weather in a city you've just moved to. Annoying, but survivable. I learned that she had one younger brother, that she went home every other Sunday to have dinner with her mother and father in a house with a porch swing that needed paint. I learned that she had a dog named Ruthie, who slept under the table like a second footstool and was old enough to have opinions. I learned that Eliza kept her kindness like some people kept money. She invested it where it might do some good, not where it might make her look rich. The first time I saw her differently was a Wednesday when Vina asked us to stay late to reconcile an account whose error kept migrating like a stubborn typo. Eliza ordered food. I tried to pay. She told me I could repay her in patience. We ate at our desks, and grease stained the corners of the printouts when she laughed at one of my dumb stories. Marcus in college, trying to impress a girl by pretending to be a musician and accidentally joining a choir. She laughed with her whole face, and under the fluorescent lights, it was warmer than it had any right to be. Later that week, she asked me why I'd moved. We were waiting for a batch job to run, a process that was slow only because it had no incentive not to be. The office was empty except for us and the plant in the corner that tilted toward the window as if eavesdropping. I told her the truth. Short, clean. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she didn't say, "I'm sorry." She asked, "And now?" "Now," I said, "I'm trying to build a life where my hands are in my own pockets." She nodded, approving or not approving. I couldn't tell. "That's harder than it sounds," she said. "Everything worth doing is," I said, and the sentence felt borrowed, but it also felt right. We didn't speak for a minute. Then she said, "I make too much soup on Sundays. My parents hate bringing leftovers. Come over this weekend and carry away what they refuse, if you like soup." It was the oddest invitation I'd ever received, and I said yes immediately because it felt like the exact right thing to say. On Sunday, I drove out to her parents' last neighborhood, a place with wide streets and trees that had learned patience. I wore a shirt my mother would call presentable, and bought flowers from a truck where the seller recommended whatever smells like clean rain. The house was blue-gray with white trim, and the kind of porch you draw when you're 10 and someone asks you to draw a house. There were 2 chairs with cushions and a wind chime that made a polite sound like glass thinking. Eliza opened the door before I knocked and said, "Come in before my mother sees you standing there like a lost soul." Her mother hugged me like a person plugging a leak. Her father shook my hand like a person testing a board for rot. Ruthie, the dog, sighed and pressed her head against my knee in a way that suggested she approved of me for now, pending further evaluation. Dinner was not soup. It was roast chicken, green beans, rolls warm enough to steam, and a salad that had exactly the right number of cherry tomatoes. The table groaned in the theatrical way tables do in family comedies. They asked me questions about where I was from, what I read, what the weather was like up north, because they were convinced it was always tragic in both directions. They didn't ask about my wife, and I didn't offer the outline. Eliza watched me like a person watching a stranger learn the rules of a game she had invented and then forgotten she invented. After dinner, we did dishes in silence, which is a test some people fail without knowing why. Her mother told me about the neighbor who painted his mailbox twice a month, as if the mail needed encouragement. Her father told me about the time he had gone fishing and caught nothing but a story, which he told with the satisfaction of someone who had been understood by a river. Eliza dried plates with a dish towel that had pineapples on it and said nothing until the last fork clinked into the drawer. Then she said, "Do you like card games?" "I like to think I do," I said. She dealt me into a game with rules that seemed to change every hand, and by the end of it, I had laughed enough to forget to check what time it was. After that, we were friends. Properly. Not the grudging, office-adjacent kind, but the kind where you can text at 6 a.m. because the sky looks like it swallowed a bruise, and she responds with a picture of her coffee cup that she's drawn a face on. The kind where you can say, "I can't sleep," and she sends you a list of possible causes that range from real, caffeine too late, to ridiculous, haunted pillow. At work, we were a better team than we'd admit. Where I sketched strict lines, she saw the negative space. Where she took leaps, I laid the stepping stones. Vina noticed and began assigning us tasks that required 2 types of precision. We didn't flirt, not really. We did something gentler, shared the weight. Meanwhile, my then wife, kept finding ways to knock on doors I no longer opened. When I didn't answer any number she called, she emailed me long notes that performed regret without knowing its meaning. Then the tone shifted. She said she was lost. She said the man she had been seeing was, her words, not what she thought. She said things had gone sour. She said she guessed she deserved it. I read those emails like a person reading a weather report about a storm already gone. I didn't answer. One afternoon, my mother called. She doesn't call much, not because she doesn't love me, but because she believes in independence like a religion. When she does call, it means she's been enlisted. She reached out to me, my mother said, skipping hello. I was polite, that's all. "What did she say?" I asked, though I knew. She told me she made a mistake. She told me she wanted to fix it. She told me she was pregnant. "Is she?" I said, the words arriving like a test I hadn't studied for. I asked her to send a picture of the ultrasound, my mother said. She sent me a grainy corner of a Google image search. "Your mother may be old, but she isn't new." She sighed in that way that meant she'd sat down in the kitchen chair by the window. "I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you that nothing in her voice sounded rooted." I sat with the phone pressed to my ear and listened to the little sound of the kitchen clock on my mother's wall. "I'm filing," I said. "I'm going to come up there and file. The longer I wait, the longer I wait." "Then do it," my mother said. "And bring that girl when you're ready. The one with the soup. I like the way you sound when you talk about her." About 2 months after I left, I drove back to the city we had shared. I timed it for a morning when the sky refused to take sides. I wore a shirt I'd ironed twice, for courage. I walked into the courthouse with a manila folder that contained everything I could turn into paper. Bank statements, the lease agreement, the phone records I didn't need but had printed anyway, because I wanted the thickness. The clerk at the courthouse had a gravelly voice and a soft efficiency that suggested she ran marathons of other people's regret daily and still made dinner on time. She stamped things with the gentle violence of bureaucracy. I asked questions. I filled in lines. I wrote my name where my name was asked for. I left the building 5 pounds lighter in a way no scale could register. I didn't tell my wife I was coming. She found out the legal way, and she texted me from a number so new it tasted metallic on my tongue. "We should talk," she wrote. "You owe me that." I didn't. I asked my attorney to do the talking. He was blandly efficient and had eyes like clean glass. She hired an attorney with an italicized name and a website that promised aggressive resolution. I hired a man whose office smelled like old wool and penciled calendars. He asked me short questions and accepted short answers. We pushed documents across digital desks for months while the language of the law did its patient work. She pushed back on principle. Not much to contest. No kids, no house, modest shared accounts, short duration. But people resist endings disproportionately to their beginnings. Her attorney requested delays. Mine declined politely. She demanded a meeting. I sent my representative. In the waiting hall outside mediation, she paced like a metronome set to panic. I stared at the floor tiles and found a repeating crack that looked like a river and decided to follow that with my eyes until my name was called. It helped. In the middle of those months, Eliza was exactly who she was. She didn't tell me it would be okay because she refused to lie and refused to claim certainty she didn't own. She delivered jokes at the precise moment they would land safely. She texted me pictures of signs in thrift stores that said things like "Live, Laugh, Laundry," and "My other car is a candle" to make me snort in public. She left a tangerine on my desk on a morning when I looked like a man who needed to hold something round and simple. When the divorce finally went through, no dramatic gavel, just a stamped document, it felt less like a door slamming and more like a window that had been stuck finally sliding up. I drove home from the courthouse with the radio off. I parked. I sat. I got out of the car and walked 3 blocks in the wrong direction before I turned around, which felt appropriate. I didn't call anyone first. I went to the only place I wanted to be, which was the coffee shop near the office with the barista who wore earrings shaped like tiny spoons. Eliza was there at a small table, elbows on wood, staring at her laptop like it had betrayed her. She looked up, saw me, and closed the laptop as if that could keep the bad inside it from escaping. "It's done," I said. She inhaled and then smiled, slow. "Okay," she said. "Then let's have cake." We'd never had cake together. We ordered 2 slices of something with frosting so white it looked like an idea, and we ate it like a ritual. I told her everything I could say without infringing on the silence that should surround some endings. She told me that Ruthie had learned a new trick that wasn't really a trick. The dog had decided that if she started sleeping on the couch, she would never get off. We laughed at nothing in particular. We sat there until the cake was a memory and the afternoon softened. After that, something changed between us. It wasn't a new thing. It was a thing that had been present for weeks, stepping lightly, finally being invited to sit down. We didn't rush it. We moved in those half steps people make when they're trying not to step on each other's shadow. A hand held a little longer than necessary when she passed me a folder. An invitation to a Saturday morning farmer's market that turned into a walk along a river whose name I didn't know yet. Our first real moment, if you can call something as ordinary as breath realer than anything else, happened on her porch at dusk. We had brought takeout because cooking seemed too ambitious for a day that had already required so much courage. The sky was the color of a bruise healing, and the cicadas were doing their one-song symphony with the professionalism of minor gods. She reached for my hand and then withdrew it, as if remembering she wasn't a person who reached first. That was enough. I closed the distance. Her mouth tasted like lime and something else I couldn't name because I was busy being a person who had, for once, chosen the exact right moment. We sat like that for a while, hands like a bridge. My stomach felt like it had learned a new kind of quiet. She said, "Tell me what you're afraid of." "Saying the wrong thing," I said. "Say the thing you want to say," she said, "and we'll find out if it's wrong together." "I want to be here," I said. With you, not as a person trying to prove something, but as a person who, I paused, not because there wasn't a word, but because there were too many, who is ready to be in his own life with someone else in it. She looked at me in a way that made me feel seen and held to a standard at the same time. Okay, she said. I can do that kind of math. We kissed like people who knew they were choosing a door they'd have to keep opening. It wasn't fireworks. It was a light going on in a room you hadn't realized you'd been sitting in the dark inside. Our first night together was the opposite of cinematic. It was slow, careful, communicative. Two people concerned with accuracy and kindness. We were shy like professionals trying a new tool. We were funny when awkwardness offered itself as an option. There was a moment with a stubborn zipper, a misplaced elbow, a small curse word that sounded like a blessing, our laughter in the dark surprising both of us. It felt not like a storm, but like a door opening into a warm room we'd both known was there, just unlit. We didn't declare love that night. We declared it when we were both brushing our teeth 2 weeks later, and she spit into the sink and said, casually, like a data point, I love you. I stared at my toothbrush. Suddenly, I love you, I said, not in a hurry, not because I felt required, but because the sentence fit neatly between my ribs. Eliza, I said, rinsing, if I ever become sentimental to the point of poetry, stop me. I will, she said, but keep the sincerity. From there, we did the thing people do when they decide to move toward rather than away. We cooked badly together until our bad cooking grew edible, then good. I learned how she took her coffee, too strong, no sugar, and she learned that I preferred tea because it felt like drinking an apology. We set alarms for the same time and then lay in bed talking through 2 alarms because we liked the feeling of choosing to be late to a world that would forgive us. We didn't hide. We didn't tell everyone. We told the people who mattered by showing them what mattered. We hunted for a house on Saturdays with travel mugs and playlists. We toured places with popcorn ceilings and low-grade sadness, places where someone had painted the bedroom brown as if naps were a bunker. We fell briefly in love with a craftsman that had beloved bones and a basement smell you could taste. We walked away, faintly heroic. We made notes. East light, kitchen big enough to dance while stirring, a laundry room that didn't feel like punishment. Our realtor, a man who wore fun socks like a personality trait, learned our rhythm. You're not difficult, he said. You're intact. We found it by accident, a bungalow with a red door that insisted on optimism under a maple that dropped leaves like applause. The living room had a window that made the morning look like it was fulfilling a promise. The inspector poked the crawl space and emerged with an expression that meant, replace the ductwork or hold your breath forever. We replaced the ductwork. We fought about paint colors. She says moody teal. I say, look, it's just very green. Compromised, 2 teals left to argue later, and signed papers that took 20 minutes and 7 years of fate. The day we moved in, my friend Marcus drove down to help. He brought his dog and a 6-pack and 2 bungee cords he swore had saved his life in the past. He hugged me hard and whispered, it's good to see you look like you again. He turned to Eliza and said, you must be the soup. And she said, you must be the choir, and they got along like people who respected each other's loyalty. We made terrible pizza in an oven with a personality. We slept on the floor the first night among boxes labeled nonsense, kitchen-ish, winter things, cord family. I woke up to the sound of my own contented exhale and didn't recognize it for a second. I proposed on a day that didn't require additional meaning. No anniversary, no holiday. A Wednesday when the mail came early and the trash truck sang a mechanical aria at 6:20 a.m. I made soup. Hers surrendered to my hands, enough to feed a small militia, which is how we measure love. I put the ring, simple, sturdy, a stone that caught light without bossing it around, in a little ceramic bowl she loved because it was slightly crooked. She found it mid-chop. You're very bad at ceremony, she said, smiling too wide. I am, I agreed. But I'm very good at wanting you forever. She said yes, like it had been decided long before language was invented. We married quietly in a botanical garden where an old man swept the path ahead of us with the ceremonial solemnity of a monk. There was no grand procession. There were no complicated vows. We stood under an arch made of iron that had outlived 2 owners and 3 philosophies of gardening and said simple vows. Ours, not borrowed, true without ornament. Eliza squeezed my hand so hard I felt it for hours afterward. Vina cried. Our parents cried in their separate ways. Mine with restraint that cracked and then was allowed to flood. Hers with unabashed joy that made strangers smile. People sat in arrangements that would confuse genealogists. It was perfect, which is to say, it didn't try to be. We started our family the way a house learns its creaks, by hearing them every night. There was love without spectacle, and then there was a positive test that turned the idea of future into calendar dates. Our first was a girl we named June because she arrived in May, and we wanted her to know she could be more than expected. She was small and loud and had the serious eyes of a baby who has opinions. The night we brought her home, Eliza fell asleep in the chair with June on her chest, and I sat on the floor next to them and cried in the way I'd forgotten my body remembered. The relief was uppermost. I had made it here. We had made it here. 2 years later, our son arrived during a thunderstorm that made the hospital windows shake like nerves. We named him Theo because the sound of it felt like a round stone in your hand. He had a shocked-up tuft of hair that refused to lie down and eyes that warmed from steel to green as the months went by. He slept only when Eliza sang him a particular Paul Simon song, and Eliza, who could carry a tune if someone else carried the rest, sang it with a seriousness that made it beautiful. He smelled, as all new humans do, like warm bread and the future. Our third was a surprise that wasn't really a surprise, because by then we had learned that life was best when it refused to map itself. She arrived on a morning thick with fog, and by afternoon the sky had burned clear. We named her AITA, because she came with a kind of logic built into her cry. By this time, our house had learned to hold sleep deprivation like a guest who always overstayed, tolerant, affectionate, ready for the whimsy. We had learned to say sorry without shame and to laugh while washing bottles as if we had planned it this way all along. The years with Eliza were not easy in the sense that you can set them and forget them. They were easy in the sense that we both believed in the work. We knew how to make choices with each other and how to forgive each other for being exactly ourselves on days when that was inconvenient. We learned to make Saturday pancakes without measuring and Sunday soup with too much time. We learned the names of our neighbors' dogs and brought casseroles to 2 funerals in 1 year, because life insists on balance in ways that don't feel fair. My ex-wife emailed once more, a year after my youngest was born. She said she had moved. She said she was in therapy. She said she was sorry and that she understood the shape of what she had done in a way she hadn't before. I wrote back 2 sentences. I wish you peace. There's nothing left between us but the past. She wrote back, thank you, and that was the end of that story. No bitterness, no project, just a quiet shore where a river had finally stopped insisting on its old course. Our families braided together without strain. My mother liked Eliza, not because Eliza made me happy, but because Eliza made her own happiness and invited me into it. Eliza's parents loved me like a son, not because I deserved it, but because love was their default policy. Our children grew like music, sometimes in bursts that startled us, sometimes in the slow, satisfying way that makes you clap for no reason in the kitchen. June painted the sidewalk with water and called it temporary art, with the gravity of a tiny curator. Theo built elaborate cities out of blocks and cried when they fell just long enough to shake it off and try again. Ada learned how to climb before she learned how to walk, because some people are built for difficulty first. We had long dinners with my mother and Eliza's parents, and the table grew in its capacity for voices. Ruthie died at 16, and we buried her under the maple with a ceremony that made the neighbors cry behind their hedges. We adopted a mutt who looked like he'd been assembled from dog parts that hadn't passed quality inspection, and named him Frank. He failed to learn basic commands and succeeded at knowing when we needed to be leaned on. On our 7th anniversary, I watched Eliza blow out candles on a cake the kids had frosted with enough sprinkles to make it loud. She looked at me over the heads of our children and did the subtle mouth twist that meant she was laughing without wanting to encourage them further into chaos. Later, after the house surrendered to quiet, we sat on the porch and put our feet up on the railing like teenagers. "Do you ever think about how we got here?" I asked. "All the time," she said. but only in a way that makes me grateful. I used to think, I said, that what happened before was the worst thing that had ever happened to me. And now, she asked, her knee against mine solid, and now I think it was the corridor I had to walk through to get to this room. She nodded, not because she agreed or because she felt obligated to echo me, but because she understood the shape of the metaphor and the truth inside it. We all have our corridors, she said. Some are lit, some you have to feel your way through. We sat there while the night did whatever nights do to make morning possible. I reached for her hand, she took it and squeezed once, twice, our signal that meant I'm here, I see you, everything's okay even if it isn't. Thank you, I said. For what? She asked. For soup, for card games, for laughing at my jokes when they're not very good, for letting me be the version of myself that knows how to be happy. She leaned her head on my shoulder. You did that, she said. I just pointed at a few doors. The kids grew up. Of course they did. June's temporary art became real art that took up space on walls that had more nail holes than I wanted to admit. Theo's block cities became a fascination with bridges, and we took small detours to drive over every one within an hour's radius so he could pronounce verdicts with the solemnity of a judge. AITA taught the mutt Frank a trick that involved him sitting on her feet while she tried to read, which wasn't a trick so much as an arrangement. Work matured into a landscape we navigated with mutual respect and occasional excellence. Vina moved up and pulled us with her like a tide. Eliza and I ran parallel teams, so our home life didn't become a staff meeting. We still argued about formatting with a passion that made interns giggle. We still saved the day sometimes by finding the missing zero hiding like a mouse. We built reputations, mine for steadiness, hers for seeing around corners. We had fights, the kind worthy of a good marriage. The time I forgot a parent-teacher conference, and she had to leave a meeting she'd worked toward for months. The time she bought an expensive, indulgent chair without talking to me because she wanted something beautiful for the room where she breastfed at 3 a.m., and I reacted like a budget committee instead of a husband. We went through hard things that don't belong to this story because they're more ours than narrative. We stayed. We adjusted. We refused to take turns being the injured party. We recognized each other on days fog obscured the obvious. We kept choosing. We learned to say, I'm sorry, and mean it. We learned to listen for the first truth behind the first complaint. We learned that you always is never true, and I feel is a door that opens instead of locks. I went back to the city once for a conference. On the sidewalk, I saw my ex across the street, both of us half turned toward a crosswalk's white hand. We recognized each other in the way people do who once shared keys. We nodded. Not curt, not warm. Two citizens of their respective countries acknowledging a previous treaty. The light changed. We crossed, separate. I tell this story now not because I need it to be a lesson. I don't. Life isn't a fable you can fold into a pocket. I tell it because it's the truth of how I crossed a painful border and found that the country on the other side wasn't a fantasy. It was simply a place where I got to choose every day to be kind, to be present, to be the person who reaches for a hand first and doesn't count the cost. On the night Ada lost her first tooth, she put it under her pillow with the seriousness of a savings bond. Eliza and I sat on the floor in the hallway, whispering the way people whisper when there are no actual sleeping dragons to soothe. Eliza looked at me, her eyes still that same ringed blue-gray that looked like weather deciding. Do you ever miss any of it? She asked, meaning before, meaning that other life. No, I said, and I felt the truth of it settle into the room like furniture. I don't miss it. I remember it. Sometimes it startles me, but I don't miss it. Good, she said, relief soft enough to be a breeze. Then, because she never let a moment float away without adding something that tethered it to the ground, she said, but I will miss this when it's gone, meaning small teeth and big wonder, and the way the kitchen smelled at 7 p.m. on a school night. Me too, I said, and we touched foreheads the way we did when the day had been long and the house had been patient. There's a picture in our hallway now, the five of us on the porch step, the red door behind us, like a punctuation mark. June is mid-blink. Theo is squinting. Ada is sticking her tongue out because she doesn't believe in stillness. Eliza's hand is on my knee. If you look closely, you can see that our shoes are scuffed, our shirts slightly wrinkled, our smiles fully earned. I look at it every morning on my way out the door and every evening on my way in, and I think about the math of it, the numbers that didn't add up until they did, the way a person can make a ledger out of regrets and then close the book with a line under the final column that says, enough. The best part is not that the pain ended. The best part is that it mattered because it led me here, to a kitchen where someone leaves a tangerine on my side of the counter when the news is bad, to a porch where a mutt pretends he's a philosopher, to a bed where we fall asleep, not to the sound of a window rattling, but to the hush of a house that knows it's a home. Here's the part I don't want to embellish because it doesn't need it. I love my wife. I appreciate her as a practice, not an event. I admire the way she holds boundaries and hands. I admire the way she unmakes a panic with a list and a joke. I admire the generosity she directs like a resource. Deliberate, renewable. Every so often, when the kids are at their grandparents' and the night is ours, Eliza and I will sit in the living room, put on a record, and talk about nothing urgent. We'll retell how we met, each of us highlighting different parts. I mention the gold necklace shaped like a door. She mentions the way I corrected her spreadsheet and then tried to pretend I hadn't. We'll tease each other lightly about who reached for whose hand first. And at the end, when the story has been told enough to be ours again, we'll look around at our life, noisier and gentler than I could have imagined in the hollow hours of that Tuesday. And we'll clink our glasses once, not in celebration of having escaped something, but in quiet appreciation of what we have built. Thank you, I think then. But I don't say it out loud because there is no one to thank but the person I was and the person I am and the person I will be tomorrow. And Eliza, who is asleep by then, her hand on a book that says there's a chapter we haven't read yet, smiles in her sleep like she knows. All right, that's all I've got for you today. Hopefully you enjoyed the ride. If you did, do me a huge favor and smash that like button and subscribe if you're new here. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you're the first to know when I post. Comment below and let me know what you would have done differently or your favorite part. Check out more content over here. The algorithm thinks you'll like this one, but I personally recommend this one. Catch you in the next video. Peace.